$4 million. The legal papers rested on my passenger seat, heavier than a brick. I was finally going to give my son the life he deserved. But the moment my boot hit the wooden planks of our front porch, that dream turned into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The rain was coming down in absolute sheets, drumming a relentless, chaotic rhythm against the roof of my battered 2008 Ford F-150. Normally, a downpour like this would have my knuckles turning white on the steering wheel, my eyes straining through the smeared windshield as the worn wiper blades struggled to keep up. But tonight, I didn't even feel the chill seeping through the drafty door panels. I felt nothing but a warm, blooming disbelief radiating from my chest. Tucked safely inside my leather jacket, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag to protect it from the damp, was a thick manila envelope. Inside that envelope was a certified bank draft and a stack of legal documents bearing the signature of one Mr. Arthur Thomas Pendleton. Me. Just 2 hours earlier, I had been sitting in the mahogany-paneled office of a downtown Boston lawyer named Gregory Abernathy. I had worn my only good suit, the one I bought for my wife Rebecca's funeral 12 years ago, and I had felt entirely out of place. Abernathy had slid a single sheet of paper across his immaculate desk. "Your Uncle Richard was a complicated man, Arthur," Abernathy had said, his voice smooth and practiced. A recluse by nature, but a genius when it came to early tech investments in the late 90s. He lived in a trailer in Oregon, but his portfolio was, well, staggering, and as his sole surviving blood relative, he left the entirety of his liquid assets to you. I had stared at the number at the bottom of the page, $4,216,000. I remembered laughing. It wasn't a joyous laugh. It was the ragged, breathless sound of a man who had spent the last 30 years breaking his back in a sheet metal fabrication plant just to keep the lights on. It was the laugh of a single father who had watched his wife die of ovarian cancer because the experimental treatments weren't covered by our bargain bin insurance. It was the laugh of a man who was currently 2 months behind on the mortgage of a decaying 2-bedroom house in Framingham. "Is this a joke?" I had asked, my voice cracking. "It is entirely real, Mr. Pendleton," Abernathy had replied softly, offering a sympathetic smile. "The taxes are already settled. The funds are legally yours. You are a wealthy man." Driving back, the reality of it finally began to settle into my bones. The sheer magnitude of $4 million was too abstract to grasp all at once, so my mind broke it down into smaller, beautiful pieces. I can fix the roof. I can finally retire. I can pay off David's debts. My son, David, my only child. At 24, David was the center of my universe. But the gravity between us had grown strained, hostile, and heavy over the last few years. Losing his mother at 12 had fractured something deep inside him. I had tried my best. God knows I worked double shifts, attended every parent-teacher conference in my steel-toed boots, and cooked dinner every night, but it wasn't enough. David had grown into an angry, secretive young man. He had dropped out of UMass Amherst 3 semesters in, citing a lack of direction, but I knew the real reason. He had gotten mixed up in online sports betting. Over the last 2 years, the debt had spiraled. He owed money to credit card companies, payday lenders, and worse men whose names he wouldn't tell me, but who had thrown a brick through my living room window last November. I had drained my meager $401k to pay off a $30,000 chunk of his debt, a move that meant I would probably be working at the fabrication plant until the day I dropped dead. David had cried that night, burying his face in my shoulder, promising he would change. He promised he would get a steady job, go back to school, and be the son I deserved. But lately the old patterns had returned. He was sleeping until noon, sneaking out at night, and locking his bedroom door. We barely spoke, passing each other in the kitchen like hostile ghosts. The air in our house was thick with unspoken resentment, my disappointment, and his suffocating shame. But as I navigated the slick, winding turns of Route 9, none of that mattered anymore. The envelope pressing against my ribs was a magic wand. It was a clean slate for both of us. I envisioned the look on his face. I would walk into the house, drop the check on the scratched laminate of our kitchen table and say, "Pack your bags, Davy. We're done struggling. We're paying off every dime you owe, and we're starting over." I imagined the heavy, suffocating anxiety lifting from his shoulders. I imagined the return of the bright, smiling boy who used to help me fix the lawnmower on Saturday afternoons. The money wouldn't just buy us comfort. It was going to buy me my son back. I turned the heater up, humming a tune Rebecca used to sing. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I pulled into the cracked concrete of our driveway, the headlights of the F-150 washing over the peeling gray paint of the house. David's car, a rust bucket Honda Civic, was parked haphazardly on the lawn, the driver's side door slightly ajar. I killed the engine and sat in the dark cab for a moment, listening to the rain hammer the roof. I took a deep, shuddering breath, patting my jacket to ensure the envelope was still there. Here we go, I thought. The first day of the rest of our lives. I pushed the truck door open and stepped out into the freezing deluge, pulling my collar up against the wind. The motion sensor light above the garage was burnt out again, a chore I was going to pay someone else to fix tomorrow, so I navigated the muddy path to the front porch by memory. Our house had a wraparound wooden porch that I had built with my own 2 hands when Rebecca was pregnant. Over the years, the wood had rotted, and the third step from the top had a distinct, loud squeal if you stepped directly in the center of it. I automatically bypassed it, stepping lightly on the far left edge out of pure habit. As I reached the top landing, I shook the water from my hair and reached into my pocket for my keys. That was when I noticed the living room window. The ancient window unit air conditioner had broken last month, and David had a habit of propping the glass open a few inches to let the draft and rain be damned. Tonight, the window was cracked open about 4 inches. The thick blackout curtains were drawn tight, but a sliver of warm yellow light spilled out onto the wet porch floorboards. I stepped closer to push the window shut before the rain could warp the sill, but as my hand hovered over the glass, I froze. Voices drifted through the narrow opening, crisp, clear, unmistakably close. One voice was David's, the other belonged to his friend, Kevin, a slick, fast-talking kid I had never trusted, the kind of guy who always wore a gold chain but never seemed to hold down a job. "I don't know, man," Kevin was saying, his voice tight, laced with a nervous tremor. "I mean, are you absolutely sure about this? Once it's done, Davy, there's no hitting undo. It's done." I stood perfectly still, the cold rain dripping from the porch eaves onto the back of my neck. My hand dropped to my side. Something dark and cold coiled in the pit of my stomach. The tone of Kevin's voice wasn't about a bet. It wasn't about a borrowed car. It was the tone of a man standing on the edge of a very high cliff. "I told you, I'm sure," David replied. His voice didn't sound like my son's. It was devoid of the anxious, defensive stutter he usually had. It was flat, calculating, ice cold. "The debt is at 80 grand, Kev," David continued, the sound of a lighter flicking and a sharp inhale of smoke following his words. "You think the Russian is going to wait another month? He told me yesterday that if I don't have 50 grand by Friday, he's going to start breaking my fingers. Then he's coming for my kneecaps." My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough that I thought they might hear it through the glass. 80,000. Good God. The envelope in my jacket felt suddenly heavier. I just needed to walk in there. I just needed to open the door and tell him it was over. I took a half step toward the front door. "But your own dad, bro?" Kevin's voice made me stop dead in my tracks. My breath hitched. I pressed my back against the damp wooden siding of the house, invisible in the shadows of the porch. Don't give me that moral high ground garbage, David snapped, his voice venomous. He's a dead end, Kev. He's a pathetic, worn-out old man who's going to work himself into a heart attack in a year or two anyway. All he does is look at me like I'm a piece of trash, like I'm the reason Mom died. I'm doing him a favor, like he's the reason Mom died. The words hit me like a physical blow to the jaw. I stumbled back half an inch, my boot scraping against the wood. I clutched my chest, my mind spinning violently. I had never, not once in my life, blamed him for Rebecca. I loved him more than breathing. What was he talking about? Okay, Kevin muttered, sounding pacified but shaken. So, you're sure the policy cleared? I checked the online portal this morning, David said, his voice dropping into a chillingly calm, business-like register. I forged his signature on the primary beneficiary update 3 weeks ago. Since it's an employer-sponsored life insurance policy, they don't look too closely as long as the premiums are paid out of his paycheck. Accidental death pays out a multiplier. $500,000, Kev. Tax-free. The rain masked the sound of the ragged gasp that tore its way out of my throat. Life insurance. Accidental death. $500,000. So how is it going down? Kevin asked. He leaves for the night shift at the plant at exactly 10:30 p.m., David explained, the ice in his voice making my blood freeze. He takes the steep access road down Route 9. It's raining. The roads are slick. You got under the truck, right? Yeah, Kevin breathed. Yeah, I did it an hour ago while you were inside. I bled the brake fluid line and loosened the main caliper bolt on the front left tire. It'll hold for a few miles. But as soon as he pumps the brakes on that steep downhill curve by the reservoir, the line will blow completely. He won't be able to stop. At 50 miles an hour, in this rain, the truck will go straight through the guardrail and into the quarry. A sickening wave of vertigo washed over me. I looked out over the porch, railing at my truck, sitting innocently in the driveway. The truck I had just driven 30 miles from Boston, in the pouring rain. I took the night off. David didn't know. He thought I was asleep upstairs, preparing for my 10:30 p.m. shift. He didn't know I had gone into the city to meet a lawyer. If I hadn't taken the highway back, if I had driven the truck just a little further, or if the lawyer's office had been closer to that steep decline on Route 9, I would be dead. I would be lying at the bottom of a water-filled quarry, trapped in a crushed cab, while the son I loved more than my own life waited for a $500,000 payout. And you're sure it can't be traced to us? David asked. It looks like a mechanical failure, Kevin said defensively. The truck is a piece of crap, Davy. The cops will take one look at the rust on the undercarriage and write it off as a tragic accident. An old, tired guy who didn't maintain his vehicle. Case closed. Good, David said. I heard the clink of glass, like 2 beer bottles tapping together. To fresh starts. Kev. Life. As soon as the check clears, I'm paying off the Russian, giving you your 20% cut, and I'm moving to California. I am never looking back at this rotting house again. I stood on the porch, trembling so violently my teeth chattered. It wasn't the cold, it was the absolute, catastrophic destruction of my entire reality. Inside my jacket was a cashier's check for $4 million, enough money to save David, enough money to give him the world. And inside that house sat a monster wearing my son's face, who had just tried to slaughter me for pennies. I don't know how long I stood there in the freezing rain. Time seemed to fracture, splitting into a before and an after. Before, I was a desperate, hopeful father, clinging to the illusion of a broken but fixable family. After, I was a target, a disposable obstacle in the way of a $500,000 payday. My hand, slick with rain and trembling with a rage I had never known before, slowly reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed the plastic bag shielding the manila envelope. $4 million. The ultimate irony tasted like battery acid in the back of my throat. I had crossed an ocean of hardship to hand my son the world, only to find out he was already building my coffin. I stepped back from the window, careful not to make a sound on the wet wood. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen illuminated the darkness, casting a pale, ghostly glow over my soaked hands. I dialed 911. 911. "What is your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice hummed softly through the earpiece. "I need police at 442 Maple Drive in Framingham," I whispered, my voice a hollow rasp. "My son and his friend just sabotaged my vehicle to kill me for an insurance payout. They are inside the house right now. The friend's name is Kevin. They are dangerous." "Sir, are you in immediate danger? Have they seen you?" "Not yet," I replied, my eyes locked on the sliver of light leaking from the living room window. "But they're about to." I hung up, slipping the phone back into my pocket. I didn't wait for the sirens. I didn't want the police to interrupt this. This was between me and the boy I had raised. I walked to the front door. The brass handle felt freezing against my palm. I turned it slowly. The deadbolt wasn't engaged. David always was careless about locking up. Pushing the door open, I stepped into the dim, cramped hallway of the home I had bled for. The air inside smelled of cheap, stale beer, wet dog, and the sharp tang of marijuana smoke. I walked heavily, my soaked work boots leaving dark, muddy puddles on the faded linoleum. I didn't try to hide my footsteps. I wanted him to hear me coming. As I rounded the corner into the living room, the conversation abruptly died. David was slouched on the thrift store sofa, a half-empty bottle of beer dangling from his fingers. Kevin was pacing near the television. When they saw me, all the blood drained from their faces simultaneously, leaving them looking like a pair of terrified corpses. "Dad?" David choked out, sitting bolt upright. The beer bottle slipped from his grip, thudding onto the carpet and spilling amber foam. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be asleep upstairs. You have your shift." I stood in the archway, rain dripping from my hair, soaking into my collar. I looked at my son. I looked past the familiar brown eyes, past the jawline he inherited from Rebecca, and I searched for the boy I loved. He wasn't there. There was only a hollow, greedy stranger wearing his skin. "I took the night off," I said, my voice eerily calm. The calmness terrified even me. The calm. You went out?" Kevin stammered, taking a panicked step backward until his shoulder hit the wall. His eyes darted wildly toward the front window, then to my truck parked outside. "You drove the truck?" "I did," I replied, stepping further into the room. I went into Boston. It was raining pretty hard. The roads were slick. Panic seized David's features. He stood up, his hands trembling. "Dad, are you okay?" "The truck. Did anything happen?" "Like what, Davy?" I tilted my head, studying him like a bug pinned to a corkboard. "Like the brake line blowing out? Like the main caliper bolt snapping on a steep downhill curve by the reservoir?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating vacuum. All the oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. Kevin let out a high-pitched, strangled noise. "Oh my God," he whimpered, grabbing his hair. "He heard us. Davy, he heard us." "Shut up!" David hissed at Kevin, but his eyes never left mine. His chest heaved. The mask of the tough, calculating criminal shattered, replaced by the pathetic, cornered animal he truly was. "Dad, listen, you don't understand. It was just talk. We were just blowing off steam. The Russian, he's going to kill me." "Dad, so you decided to kill me first," I stated, the words falling like stones onto the floor. No, I wouldn't actually let it happen," David lied, the desperation making his voice crack. "I was going to stop you before you left for work. I swear." "You didn't know I went to Boston," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "If I had taken the back roads instead of the highway, I would be dead at the bottom of the quarry right now. You cut my brakes, David. You forged my signature on an insurance policy. He made me do it, Kevin shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my son. It was his idea. The 80 grand, the insurance. He planned the whole thing. You little rat. David lunged at Kevin, but I stepped between them, shoving David back by his collar. He stumbled, falling hard onto the sofa. Sit down, I roared, a commanding, thunderous boom that shook the framed photos on the walls. It was the voice of a patriarch, a voice I hadn't used in years. David shrank back, his eyes wide with genuine terror. Slowly, deliberately, I unzipped my wet leather jacket. I reached inside and pulled out the plastic grocery bag. I unwrapped it, letting the cheap plastic fall to the floor, and produced the crisp manila envelope. Do you know why I went to Boston today, David? I asked, my voice dropping back to a lethal whisper. He just stared at the envelope, shaking his head mutely. A lawyer named Gregory Abernathy called me yesterday, I continued, pacing slowly in front of him. It turns out your great-uncle Richard passed away. He left his entire estate to me. I opened the flap of the envelope. I pulled out the certified bank draft. I held it up, holding it by the corners so the warm, yellow light of the living room lamp illuminated the heavy black ink. David squinted. Then his eyes widened so far I thought they might tear. His jaw went slack. $4,216,000, I read aloud, letting the syllables roll off my tongue. 4 million. Kevin whispered, sliding slowly down the wall until he was sitting on the carpet, his hands over his mouth. I drove home in the pouring rain, crying tears of joy. I told David, my voice finally breaking, the raw agony of a broken heart bleeding through my anger. I thought, this is it. This is how I save my boy. I was going to pay off the Russian tomorrow morning. I was going to pay off every single debt you had. I was going to buy us a new house, put you back through college, and give you the life your mother and I always dreamed for you. David let out a choked, devastated sob. It wasn't a sob of guilt. It was the crushing, agonizing realization of what he had just thrown away. Dad, he reached out, his hand grasping at the air toward the check. Dad, please, we can still do that. We can fix this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was desperate. I wasn't thinking straight. You were thinking perfectly straight, I corrected him, stepping back out of his reach. You calculated the payout multiplier. You knew exactly what you were doing. I'll cancel the policy, David begged, tears streaming down his face, dropping to his knees on the stained carpet. I'll fix the truck. We can just walk away from this, Dad. We have $4 million. We don't need the insurance money. We can leave tonight. I looked down at the boy I had rocked to sleep, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, the boy I had bled for. I felt absolutely nothing. The love I had for him had died on that front porch, murdered just as surely as he had intended to murder me. We don't have $4 million, David, I said softly, sliding the check back into the envelope. I have $4 million. In the distance, barely audible over the drumming rain, the wail of sirens began to cut through the night air. Kevin's head snapped up. Sirens. Oh, God. He called the cops. Kevin scrambled to his feet, bolting toward the back door in the kitchen. Let him run, I said to David, who was paralyzed on his knees. He won't get far on foot in this storm. The sirens grew deafeningly loud, the flashing red and blue lights piercing through the gap in the blackout curtains, painting the living room in frantic, rhythmic strokes. Tires screeched on the wet asphalt of the driveway. Doors slammed. Dad, please, David screamed, grabbing my pant leg. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them Kevin did it. If I go to prison, the Russian will have me killed inside. You know he will. He will. I looked down at his grip on my jeans. You should have thought about the consequences before you put a price tag on my life. The front door burst open. Flashlights swept the room, blinding us. "Framingham police! Hands in the air! Show me your hands!" 3 officers flooded the living room, their service weapons drawn. Officer Mitchell, a man I recognized from the local diner, took one look at the scene and barked orders. "On the ground! Face down! Arms out!" David didn't resist. He collapsed onto his stomach, weeping hysterically as Mitchell drove a knee into his back and wrenched his arms behind him. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs echoed like a judge's gavel in the small room. Another officer sprinted into the kitchen, shouting at Kevin, who had apparently frozen at the back door. The charge: attempted murder. The evidence: tampered brake lines, the forged insurance document, and a recorded 911 call. The verdict: there was no escape. Mitchell stood up, hauling David to his feet. David's face was smeared with tears and carpet dust. He looked at me, a final, pathetic plea in his eyes. "Dad," he whimpered. I turned my back to him. "Take him out of my house," I told the officer. I stood in the living room as they marched him out into the rain. I listened to the cruiser doors slam shut, and I watched the red and blue lights fade down Maple Drive, taking the last remnants of my old life with them. The house was dead quiet, save for the rain. I walked over to the armchair, sat down, and pulled the manila envelope out once more. I traced the numbers with my thumb. Tomorrow, I would call a mechanic to tow the truck. I would call a real estate agent to list the house as is, and then I would drive to the airport. My son had tried to end my life tonight for $500,000. Instead, he gave me the closure I needed to actually start living it. Wow, what an intense and heartbreaking journey. If this story of betrayal, survival, and a shocking $4 million twist kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. Share this video with your friends to see what they would do in Arthur's shoes. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for more gripping, real-life drama stories delivered every single week. What would you do? Let us know in the comments below.